Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to give it about 30 to 40 seconds for people to join. Okay, the numbers are growing quickly. We're almost there. Just a few more seconds. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to another Aero South Africa webinar in conjunction with Safety First Aviator. And tonight we're going to be talking about pilots. What do you think about before takeoff? My name is Neil Piper, the head of content for Messi Frankfurt, South Africa. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the fabulous Annelie Reynolds. Annelie is a portfolio director of Messi Frankfurt, South Africa, and the show director of Aero South Africa. Annelie, good to see you, and over to you.
Thank you, Neil, for the introduction. Welcome to all aviation enthusiasts joining us for the Safety First Aviator and Aero South Africa webinar today. As Neil mentioned, my name is Annelie Reynolds and I'm the show director for Aero South Africa. As you might know by now, we have confirmed the dates for the physical Aero South Africa event next year, which we are extremely excited about. It will take place at Wonderboom National Airport from the 7th to the 9th of July 2022, and I, for one, cannot wait to do business in person again. The webinar you are attending tonight is probably one of the most important Safety First Aviator webinars to date. Our well-versed experts will dissect the burning question that Neil mentioned earlier, and it's also an extremely important question. What do you think about before takeoff? We want to make this session as interactive as possible, so please do ask your questions in the Q&A box. The 5 presenters tonight will each be looking at different aspects, taking this question into consideration. Cobus Toerien kicks off the session by sharing an overview of the topics our panel of experts will cover. Ari Levien will share ideas on how to determine your mental state and how you know you are fit to fly, especially during the current pandemic we're facing. Then Franz Smit, our weather expert, will ask the audience to explain the August winds. The amazing Santjie White, our own liver haxie, will be discussing the available options with regards to search and rescue. Now, the one that you guys need to stay online for tonight is Caroline Knoll, who will close off and tell you everything you ever wanted to know about windsocks. So as you can see, we've got a jam-packed lineup tonight, and without wasting time, Neil is going to introduce you to your host for the evening.
Annelie, you've obviously been practicing. I'm very proud of you. That was amazing. Well done. And really, on that note, it really is my pleasure to welcome and introduce Franz Smit of Pilot Insure, who will moderate the webinar tonight and will formally introduce our speakers. Annelie's already touched on their subjects, but let Franz do that. And just a quick one, Franz is the founder and MD of Pilot Insure, a specialist and boutique advice firm focusing on investments and risk cover for pilots. Franz has been our host since the start of this webinar series. And yeah, we still like him, not for his looks though, but because he always keeps it fresh and delivers an almost conversational approach to these webinars. Tonight, you will ask for your engagement as your interaction will be key. Franz, as always, it's a pleasure to welcome you, and over to you, Franz.
Lekker, thanks, Neil. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Jam-packed session as always. I think we've got one more speaker than normal, so we're really going to run through it to see if we can keep up to the time. Caroline, that's not aimed at you at all. And so let's start things out properly. So we've got all these speakers, and they're going to be talking to you about their various topics. I think it's all very fascinating. And for everyone who's joined us a couple of times, you'll notice that we do change the topics up quite a lot. Every time it's something different, something new, something to learn, and hopefully you take away just to make you a little bit safer the next time you go flying. So tonight is we want to try and make it a bit more conversational, as been mentioned before. So I really urge you guys, look at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A section. We're going to be asking you guys a lot of questions tonight, and we'd really love you to participate, give your answers. As you would have heard millions of times in aviation, there's really no such thing as a bad question or a bad answer. Yeah, we're all part of this, trying to learn and improve ourselves. So please get involved, ask your questions, or when we're asking you questions, answer them. We'll all have a look at it and find it. As per always, you know where the toilet is. Hopefully you've got a cup of coffee or a whiskey or a brandy with you to enjoy the next hour and a bit with us, where we just talk about aviation safety, and how our thoughts and ideas can improve the safety for all of us when we're in the sky. Let's get started, and sticking to the questions. Cobus is up first tonight, and Cobus, thanks very much for joining us. Always great to have your knowledge and experience, which is weird because you're like 35, so I don't know where you got all of that from. But Cobus, I think let's start off and just get a little bit more personal. So we had this big discussion, and most of you have been here before. So what we're going to be doing tonight is just chatting about the people a little bit, getting a little bit more personal. So instead of going through a CV and I parrot read it, and I'm going to give each speaker a chance to just chat to us a little bit about their flying background or how they got into aviation, as not absolutely every single one of us on the panel of pilots. Cobus, so let's start with you. I mean, what made you start in the aviation scene? I mean, I know you're ex-SAF boy, etc., but how did it all really start?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Franz, thank you very much. Let me just correct one thing. One day I'll be 35, but I can wait. A very good question. And why I know the answer is because I had to ask my mom, or my folks always explained when I was about 3 years old, the Sabres just came into South Africa. So there's my 35 years. And I was very scared of them every time. We lived in Sunnyside, so you can imagine when they take off, they come over the house, and I was always underneath the bed. And then one day my dad explained to me, said, why are you scared of them? I said, yes, yeah, but I love them. I love aircraft, but I'm scared of it. He said, well, the only thing you can get rid of that scare or fright is when you go and fly them. And that's how it started. So it started before I knew about it. So that in very quick, Franz, that answers your question.
Well, it's almost the story of facing your fears, eh? And then that became like a lifetime passion and love.
Well, since then, with birthdays, you know what I got as a present? Model aircraft. I mean, and I was a happy chap. And I built lots of them. So good evening, everybody. Sorry, Franz?
No. I was just going to say about birthdays. And so my birthday's on the 24th of December. So that means every single year. And if you grew up in the old school Afrikaans household that I did, so you're definitely going to get socks and onderbroeke, right? That's definitely, someone's going to give that to you. Yeah. So what would happen is on the 24th, I'd get like 6 onderbroeke, and on the 25th, I'd get the socks, so they just split it up a little bit.
Well, you think that's bad luck. The irony is, after all the years, I never got to fly the Sabre. As we, because I did studying at the academy, military academy, and when I went to eventually got to Petersburg on the fighter course, the Sabre course, they just grounded the Sabres. So the closest I got to the Sabre, we leave our Impala helmets on the Sabre's wing, go sign the books, and then go. So don't feel too bad.
Okay, let's get cracking.
Everybody, thanks for joining us. And what I'd like to do is very short, mine is very short tonight, just to thank you, Neil, is introduce the theme. What do you think about before you go and fly? What I would like to answer the question is, and feel type there in the questions and answers, the chats, we'll look at it, Franz will look at it. What are the most important words in gaining and maintaining good teamwork and safe operations? Now, if the answer is, can you be more vague, please? Let me tune it down a little bit. I'll ask you 4 words. What do you think? What do you think are the most important words? And if I can give you more hints, what do you think? I only see one. Come on, guys, type. What do you think are the most important words? So there's usually 4. And again, it's vague. Next, thanks, Neil. We give you some tips. What do you think? And that's important to say, what do you think are the most important words? Now, I'm not sure if anybody's got it right as yet. Neil, Franz, you can monitor. The question we want to ask this is that keep quiet, listen to understand. Sorry, I can read it here. Wow, technology. Very good, very close. Let me give you another tip. Just tick it once more, Neil, and you'll see it will blink again. There we go. What do you think? Now, as simple as it sounds, those are the 4 most important words, and it's not my thinking. It's in aviation, especially for students and multi-crew environments. Thanks, Neil. So as simple as it sounds, it's not always easy to stop and ask that question. In fact, it requires practice, but it's absolutely worth it. I was going to say, think wide, think CRM, think relationships. Isn't it important in relationships as well? I was just scared somebody asked, will you marry me? And that's 4 words, but that's not where I was going. Careful, go. I'm not going to say anything about that one. But basically, there we go. What do you think? Now, it can be as easy as asking, what do you think? Are we fit to fly today? And Ari will explain a little bit more about that. Asking, what about the weather forecast? Now, whether it's your student, whether it's your captain, whether it's your co-pilot, whether it's your friends, your comrades are wrong, whether you understand what I mean, colleagues, rather better word for me. What do you think? What do you think about the weather forecast? Well, there it is. What's the weather forecast? And Lauren will ask the question as well. Then what are our search and rescue options today? Fortunately, we know Santjie when we got contacts and we can ask the accident. And then what do you do if unstable on the approach? For instance, there's crosswinds. We in the crosswinds, August, right? It's August. And the crux here is look at the windsock. Well, Caroline will explain more about that one. Thanks, Neil. So the question is why? Why would you like to answer these questions? And it says here, simply, it communicates that you're interested in that's your students, your crew members, or your family, ideas and opinions, and it doesn't not matter how much experience they are, it doesn't matter, but you're bringing them in. Now, it sets a time for teaching effective communication from day one in becoming a professional pilot, especially when flying multi-crew later on. So if you want to go fly multi-crew, even if you don't, just practice this. What do you think? And ask your student, ask your captain, your co-pilot, whoever it is. And especially when there's an emergency, what do you think? And you'll find out for the CRM gurus, thanks Neil, they will understand this word, what do you think? And it's very powerful. What's also important is to say, Annelie, what do you think? It even personalizes the question, what do you think? Now, if you don't know your co-pilot's name, say, hey, co-pilot, what do you think? If you can't call your captain by name, see Carl is here, Bolweg, you say, not captain, you say Captain Colvin, but what do you think? Thanks, Neil. So for us, it's very heavy in the CRM parts. It's what we call for me, it's one of the 4 most important CRM principles in verbal, procedural, behavior categories. Big words, don't worry about it. It's bringing in behavior, which is a direct and positive attempt to involve another group or crew member. When something goes wrong, some people speak up, like myself. I always speak up, but it means that, it's just blah, blah, blah. But the one in the corner, even in group work, teamwork, that doesn't say anything, ask that person, hey, Kippy, what do you think? And must probably come up with a brilliant answer. Thanks, Neil. And that's all I want to just set the tone for tonight, is to think about your thinking. What do you think? So, Franz, thanks. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I think, this is all about the thought process. And, especially with you, Cobus, any of these things we can chat about for hours. And I think every person's answer will be slightly different, but we'll eventually come to the same thing. Just, is this the best, the wisest decision to make at the time? I mean, isn't that really the question you must keep on answering and to yourself?
If I make quickly, is I see Paul Ludick. He also said it is keep quiet, listen to understand, and that's exactly where we want you guys to think. Because what do you think? So now you have to keep quiet and listen to understand. And Paul, thanks. You had it spot on. That's not the 4 words I was referring to, but that's exactly the response we're looking for. Thanks, Franz. Thank you very much.
Yeah, like
Thank you, everybody.
Arthur, we also see your response there. I think it's perfect. What do you notice about noticing that takes it even deeper?
Yeah, no, that's
Oh.
Arthur. Yeah,
No, 100%.
thank you.
Okay, thanks, Cobus. Guys, next up is Ari. Now, Ari Levien is part of Mayday SA and he's been there for a while. And I mean, Ari, I know you a massive avid aviator for years and years and years, and bit of a student of aviation as you call yourself. But same question, Ari. How did it all start? Where did the aviation bug bite you?
I don't actually remember. I was too small to remember. I have some of my earliest memories are dreams of flying, and I'm one of those very privileged people who managed to get my PPL before I learned how to drive. My mom used to have to take me to the airport to go and fly at Cessna 210 because I wasn't old enough to drive a car. And now,
and it says and a 210, man. So let's start there.
Well, that was sort of the first real conversion I did after my PPL. So it goes back a long way, and it's 32 years now. So it's a good road, and I don't intend stopping anytime soon. It's, as I tell people, if they think that cocaine is addictive, they clearly haven't tried flying. And
Yeah,
it's more expensive.
That joke, I think we've all heard of it. Teach your kids about flying and they'll never have money for drugs.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, excellent. Ali, thanks, man. Go for it. Let's hear your presentation.
Okay, thanks. Right, that should be the intro slide. Thanks for the introduction, and we're going to talk about, am I fit to fly? But as usual, first we're going to talk a little bit about Mayday. There are the contact details. And I think for those who don't know, I'm just going to spend a few minutes longer than I normally do, just rehashing some of what Mayday does. Essentially, Mayday is for anybody aviation related having any sort of a crisis. We provide absolutely confidential support, and that's whether you've had an aircraft incident or accident, whether you're worried about losing your medical, if you've got concerns about substance abuse, if you've got license issues, relationship problems, whatever it is, if you need to talk to somebody, then Mayday is for you. And I just need to reiterate, it's absolutely confidential. We do not speak to your employer. We do not speak to the CAA. We do not speak to your company. As I said, we don't speak to the FAA. We don't speak to your AME. We don't speak to your spouse. And we, as far as I know, do not report to the CIA or the KGB. So if you need confidential support, give us a call. Tonight's topic is, am I fit to fly? And this is always an interesting one because the medical side of it is fairly simple from a legal point of view. But just because you happen to have a valid medical does not mean that you are fit to fly on the day. And the I'm safe checklist that we talked about in the last personal minimums is a good starting point, and I'm going to take us through that. But most importantly, you've got to be honest with yourself. There is no way that you can say that you are fit to fly or you're not fit to fly if you're not prepared to be honest with yourself. And that's very true of an awful lot in aviation. Are you under maximum gross? We'll talk about density, altitude in future, but you've got to be honest. And what it boils down to is that you have to be physically and mentally ready, willing, and able to manage the worst possible challenge when you're not expecting it. And that means that if you're not going to be able to cope with the engine fire on takeoff because you didn't sleep last night, or you worried about where making ends meet, or whatever the concern is, then actually you're not fit to fly. Let's talk about the I'm safe checklist. Illness is the obvious one, and we can talk about the physiological impact, how it makes you feel. And the big ones for aviators that we tend to be a little bit cavalier about: swelling in the sinus cavities. I've been a passenger on a commercial airliner with a blocked nose, and I didn't have a good time. There's certainly no way I would have been able to control an aircraft. The pain was that extreme. But malaise, that feeling of being unwell, for those who've recently had a cold or something like that, you're not actually able to command an aircraft. Pain, if you've hurt a limb, you're not able to manipulate the controls adequately. A temperature can be quite debilitating as well. And there's the psychological impact. If you know that you're not well, you tend to suffer from self-doubt, and you certainly are not really able to concentrate. That's not a great start to piloting anything through the sky, whether we're talking about a microlight or an A340. Medication. This is a very awesome topic. My dad is a former prof of surgery, and he was very big on telling his students that all medications have got side effects. And that's true of aspirin and Panado as well. You need to be very careful of certain vitamins and supplements, and just be very careful of over-the-counter meds, because if you don't need a script, you tend to believe that you can actually take it and fly. The best advice is to speak to your medical examiner and read the package insert. I know that that's an exercise in frustration. They are getting better at it. A shortcut is to maybe have a look at the FAA's database. That's very easily searchable on Google, and you can see what the active ingredient does. Some common problems that people don't really know about. Very topical one is vaccines. The South African CAA, the European regulator, and the FAA all require pilots to ground after vaccination, typically for 24 or 48 hours. Some vaccines are 72, and that generally includes the COVID vaccine. So for those of us who are in the process of getting our jabs, I had my second one this morning. I'm grounded this weekend. For South Africa, some of the anti-malarials can preclude you from flying. And a very overlooked one for a lot of our female aviators, some of the oral contraceptives, you're required to be on them for 3 months before your medical is valid. Sedation is not the only concern. Medications can make you sleepy, but that's not the most major problem. Something as simple as a omega-3 supplement can act as an anti-clotting agent, and that's something that you need to be aware of. Moving on, stress. We've talked about stress at length in others. Stress basically reduces your capacity to think and respond. And while we tend to focus on acute stress, chronic stress can have many of the same issues. Major stress examples: loss of a loved one, divorce, but marriage as well. So it's not just the nasty things. Illness can be very stressful. Illness of a loved one, also moving house and changing jobs, money worries. Don't underestimate the effect of stress on your abilities. As I've mentioned in a previous webinar, your brain is what you use to detect stress, but that's actually the most affected by stress. It's kind of like hypoxia. You've got to be very alert to the symptoms it can cause in you. Alcohol is the next part of the checklist. 8 hours, I'm sure everybody knows, is the legal minimum, and you should consider increasing this, especially if you have had a bit of a party, probably 24 hours after real consumption. The US Air Force has done a number of studies, and they've shown that performance is worse from a hangover than when you are inebriated. So that's just something to consider. The next point, recreational use of drugs and pharmaceuticals really is not something that is compatible with aviation. Many substances that are often abused can take more than 3 days to be fully excreted, and the performance impact is huge. So that's something just to stay away from if you are flying. Fatigue. This is probably worse than alcohol if you are severely fatigued. It affects your judgment more than it affects your motor skills. So you'll be able to get that crosswind landing absolutely fine, but you tend to lose judgment as to whether or not you should fly. That's a fairly common theme that you will have seen. Your reaction time is often greatly slowed down by fatigue. Simplest thing is to look at what the airlines do. They limit duty time. And if you speak to your favorite airline pilot, they will tell you that very often, even the limits that they fly with are not really sufficient. Make sure that you are well rested, you've had enough sleep, and that differs from person to person. But you should be able to figure out what you really need. And also make sure that you've had enough to drink and enough to eat. And that doesn't mean carbo loading and downing a Coke just before you go and fly. Water, and preferably something on the protein side from the nutrition. Emotion. Definitely the hardest one for most of us to judge. There's some overlap with stress, and the ones to be really concerned about, know your Star Wars. Anger, fear, hate, worry, mourning, those lead to the nasties. If you have any of those, think about whether or not you should be flying. And that's an honest question. If you are not sure, consider taking an instructor or a mentor pilot with you, or pick up the phone and discuss your proposed flight with a trusted mentor or an instructor or a DFE. An important question to ask yourself is, if I don't make the flight today, how much difference will it make in a year's time? Just be honest with yourself. And my favorite mantra is, the machine doesn't have the brain, you have it. And if you are not sure, stay on the ground. Once again, the Mayday contact details, and very happy for questions.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Thanks, Ari. We've got a couple of questions that just came in, and I think I'm just going to read through some of them, and then if there's anything you want to respond to, go for it. Paul says we all have our own bag of bricks, psychological, emotional stresses that we carry as a pilot. We need to consciously force ourselves to leave the bag at the hangar before you start your pre-flight, as it will affect your reactions during emergencies. If you cannot leave the bag at the base, don't fly. I love that.
I think that's awesome. And that ties in perfectly. You've just got to be honest with yourself. If you can't leave the bag at base, don't fly. And I think we've all had the opportunity to contradict that, and we think we've left it behind, and you get to the holding point and you realize that perhaps you've left the pitot cover on. That's a good sign, guys, that it's time to really consider whether you are truly fit to fly. And I think the other comment that I see there is from Mike Blackburn about accurate calculation of duty day. It starts when you wake up, not when you start flying. For those of us that are recreational aviators, absolutely, Mike, that's spot on. Guys, if you're flying as part of fun or as recreation or in support of your business, and you've had a long day at work and you're then going to fly yourself back home, need to be honest about whether your capabilities are still good enough and still fresh enough. Excellent point.
Cool. Peter, Leah, I don't know, the sounds I think good for everyone else. Maybe just put your, I don't know, put your volume up, something closer to the ear in your old age, you know, something like that. Okay, thank you very much, Ari. That's brilliant. I always appreciate your inputs. And guys, Mayday SA, please use them. They're brilliant. I've got personal experience with the guys. You know, zero judgment. Even if you're just having a day where you're feeling a bit down and you just want to talk to someone outside of your circle, you know, reach out to the guys. They're always there to chat and have a cup of coffee and talk to you about whatever it is that you're going through at this moment. Thanks, Ari. Okay, so next up we've got Lauren. Now, Lauren is our resident weather person. And you won't believe it, but she's actually live with us tonight. You know, she did her makeup and her hair, and I think we're all very privileged to have her here. Lauren, I'm just going to say unmute yourself just in case you make that mistake. Thanks. I mean, let's listen to what you have to say. Again, guys, I'm just going to remind you all, this is very much you know, dialogue. We want you to talk to us. We want you to, you know, comment and ask questions or just give some sort of input so we can have an informal discussion. Lauren, same for you. Let's hear what you have to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Franz. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining and once again for having me. And now let's just quickly share the screen. So my question to you is, what is in the weather forecast today? Does anyone know? If there's anyone typing, I'm not sure if I can see. I don't think I'll be able to see.
Lots of rain in the Cape and so on, Lauren.
I can see the chats. Here we go. Cold front.
Cold front. Here we go.
Yes, so definitely a quite intense cold front heading over. It's currently raining here in Cape Town. We're expecting widespread rain, heavy downpours, significantly strong winds, and that's in moving over to the central parts and over to the eastern parts. But before the cold front, yesterday already, there was some weather that already happened over the central parts. We had thunderstorms that even gave us hail in the Free State. Now, we're not in summer, so that sounds a bit odd, but it is in the transition season. So what is happening is our high pressures are starting to slowly migrate now down south, and that's starting to bring that nice tropical moist air from the tropics down with our surface trough. So we are heading into the month of August, and especially for the northeastern parts, we are starting to experience what we call the August winds. So that's another question that I'd like to pose to you all is, how and what are these August winds? How do they develop? If anyone knows how they develop, and what are the little significant tricks or little traits that one can look for in a forecast to see if we're going to experience a super windy day. In Gordons Bay. I'm just reading there. I'm sure the August winds are born in Gordons Bay. While you guys are pondering about that, another question is, as you guys have mentioned, that the pre-flight steps are very, very important. So what are the weather parameters that are important to you? Do you look for snow? Do you look for strong winds aloft? Do you only look at your surface winds? Do you look at your winds at your destination? Do you have a weather checklist, perhaps, of certain parameters that you look at so that you can do your other calculations for example, like your altitude density or density altitude. Sorry, I've got that mixed. What are those things? Michael says August winds, annoying, and they come from the frustrating, let me just move that, frustrating high pressure, poor viz, clouds, winds, and temperature. Those are very good 3 parameters to look at, definitely. Another answer, August winds, is due to the movement of the ITCZ, if I recall correctly, where it moves south again. Dew points. That is also another good parameter to look at, definitely. So let's have a look what I have here. There we go. Sorry for that finger trouble, guys. Right. So again, what do you guys think about? So here's some parameters that I found I get asked a lot from you guys over the phone when I give weather briefings. Surface winds at your destination, and as well as at your departure allocation, your winds aloft at your cruising level. What are they going to be doing? If you're going to be crabbing across South Africa from Pretoria to Cape Town, your visibility, cloud ceiling. Do you wonder about your weather en route? Do you think about thunderstorms? Are you going to encounter widespread thunderstorms, isolated thunderstorms? And if isolated thunderstorms, are you ready to be able to maneuver around them? Do you know what to do when you face a thunderstorm at your departure, departure and your destination? Wind shear. Do you know how to handle wind shear? QNH. That is a little parameter that I feel doesn't get enough gold stars. It's a very, very important parameter. Your surface temperatures. That also plays a very, very big role. Your freezing level. I know our country isn't as cold like up in the north where we get rime, icing and all those things that is a lot or more prone in our country, but it's definitely something that we do experience. For example, in this year, for those who do follow the South African Weather Service, we recently have been doing some freezing fog forecasts, where one of our forecasters is starting to pick that up. And we had an incident at OR Tambo where we had the freezing fog. It developed, so it was radiation fog, developed over the central parts of Mpumalanga. It started to advect into Gauteng. It closed the whole OR Tambo, and it was rime fog. So it caused icing on the aircrafts that were parked outside. And that caused I can't remember how many hours of delays, but you guys can imagine what havoc that trickled down in the delays of all the departures, of trying to get the icing off all the aircrafts. And then I put in another parameter, pressure gradients. And that is also why looking at a synoptic chart is so important. And you need to try and bring all these parameters together to paint a picture of how your jungle gym is going to look like, if I can use that word, your flying environment. Here's an example. I'm going to try and help you guys out about the August winds. So this is a synoptic chart that I grabbed off Windy TV. And this is a few days ahead after this cold front that's bringing the snow and all that stuff for us. So now, as you guys said, it's the time of the year where the high pressures start migrating down south, and that starts to push down our cold fronts. So now the cold fronts are still intense. So now it's like a battle between these pressures. So we've got that cold front coming now through from the south western parts. We've got the Indian high that's starting to develop and strengthen. So he's going to be parked there over the south eastern parts over here. And now you've got this high pressure South Atlantic with the cold front just behind it. And now that cold front is pushing and squeezing this high to come in over the south western parts of the country. And then that in time then pushes your surface trough even further eastwards. But now you've got a strong, deep, high pressure sitting to your east. This bad boy is not moving anyway. So what happens? Your pressure gradient starts to tighten, and pressure equals wind. So now you've got it tighter, a lot more tighter than this lax gradient here over your central and eastern parts. It's going to become a lot more tighter over your eastern parts here. So your high then brings in your cold northeasterly winds. It brings it over your escarpment into your northeastern parts. And then you've got your surface trough sitting more in this fashion with your high, your South Atlantic high, then ridging here. So you've got, if you can bear with me and paint the picture in your mind, you've got now these pressure gradients more tightened over this area. And that is also why the first question, or the first answer to the question, is why only Gauteng, for example, in these northeastern parts experience the August winds. It's because this is where the pressure gradients becomes the tightest. So now you've got this northeaster coming through. It's that cold, cold wind that you guys are feeling currently that just like cuts through you. It's because it brings a cold southerly fetch. It brings that cold air over. And what that does, if it's tight enough, it causes strong to significantly strong winds. And those winds, depending on your orientation of your runways, cause crosswinds. Now, these crosswinds cause your surface level wind shear and difficulty in takeoff and landing. So your crosswinds and knowing how to read your wind speeds are very, very important, guys. So if there's any more questions from your guys' side regarding this, or any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate. There's my email address. I'm here to help you guys. Please put in your questions and answers into the chat box. I hope I've answered some questions and shedded some light. And soon we'll touch on more of the summer circulation later on. But yeah, that's all from my side.
Thanks, Lauren. That's great. I think it's very cool. I don't think I've ever been explained how all of that works and comes together in such detail so quickly. So I think for the yeah, that was brilliant. So I think for the guys, you know, if you were listening and you kind of lost it halfway because it was too much information, we're definitely going to be sending out this the link to this webinar. So you're welcome to relook, rewatch, and make your notes and etc. And thanks for your contact details, Lauren. So if you guys do that and you're really astute and very interested, you're very welcome to email Lauren. She'll definitely get back to you. Thanks, Lauren. Okay, there's Lauren, maybe just one question. We can just, if you could just jump back on again. The question is, where can we get multi-level synoptic charts? To get
multi-level synoptic charts, sure.
Yeah.
Synoptic charts is only surface, unfortunately. But Windy TV has got a very fancy tool, so you can display dual potential heights, and you will then be able to move up from the surface up into your flight level, and then you'll be able to see what your pressure gradients are doing at whatever level you'd like. So you'll be able to actually see if you have a surface, upper air trough supporting your surface trough, and you'll then be able to see conversions, diversions, and all sorts of things. I hope I've answered you.
You know, someone who's really passionate and know what they're talking about if you're just asking for a name of a website, but then it's another 5-minute presentation. Brilliant.
Sorry, I can go on and on. It's terrible.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. No, I think we're all exactly the same. Thanks, Lauren.
All right.
Sorry, Santjie. I kind of cut you off there just to quickly get this question answered as we go. Santjie, hello, you there?
I'm right here.
Hello, Santjie. Say.
Ek is met jou.
Thank you. Okay, so guys, again, the same thing. Santjie, I think we all know who Santjie is. If you don't know who she is, so you definitely should know. Santjie has helped thousands of people out of very difficult situations, and Santjie is an ICAO SAR expert. Santjie, again, we've chatted at length about your, brilliant career of service, which I think it really is. But for you, how did the aviation thing happen? Was it by chance? Was it, a passion project? Because you've been around for as long as I can remember. Very much in the background. Well, hopefully in the background. If you're in the forefront of something bad happened, But for most people, you've been in the background where we want you to stay. How did aviation happen for you?
France, is actually quite interesting. I grew up in a house where there was only brothers, and I lived right at the Heidelberg close to the Heidelberg VOR. So these beautiful big metal tubes always came over our house on the arrivals into Johannesburg at that stage. And I was fascinated by what these things could do. And obviously, as a young child, you always thought about, where's this going to take me, So I think that was the one. And obviously, I was lucky enough to crash my brother's model aircraft. But I think when we talk search and rescue, we were involved in the very first ANSP search and rescue involvement was Keith Page. And I joined as a student SMC or a SMC assistant, and I was just so blown away by the processes, the suffering, how could I help? And there I decided that 28 of my 38-year career would be spent as a search and rescue person, and just the difference that you could make in people's lives when they needed you the most. I think that's what it is. And until today, as I said earlier, I wanted to walk away, but you can't. You've got to make a difference in a million other ways, and you've got to be there for people in need. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm still around.
100%. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Santjie. I think it's very important for us to know where it all started. Okay, brilliant. I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. So search and rescue. Let's see. Let's go to what is search and rescue. Search and rescue: search to locate persons in distress. Rescue is the operation to retrieve persons in distress, provided for their initial medical or other needs, and deliver them to a place of safety. The hope is a successful search will result in a successful rescue. Let's think about our search and rescue options, and everybody knows this one very well. We have automatic search and rescue. So that's for all flights between aerodromes where air traffic services are provided, and all flights conducted in controlled airspace. And thinking about this, and the what do you think is really what do you think? Do we think about search and rescue, or is that the one thing that Franz mentioned earlier that we don't want to talk about, that we don't want to think about, because when we need this service, it's actually bad. When we look at, obviously, we need to remember that search and rescue normal can only be filed for flights which is bound for an aerodrome where an ATSU is in operation, and it must never be indicated when the flight is bound for an aerodrome where an ATSU is not in operation. And I mean, it's simple, because when you fly from point A to point B, somebody will be waiting for you at point B. And if there's nobody at point B, how do we know that you're missing? Search and rescue action will obviously then be instituted automatically in the event of a missed position report while your aircraft is flying within controlled airspace, and or in the event of a non-arrival at your destination. Search and rescue action will not be provided while the aircraft is flying in uncontrolled airspace, except in an emergency. That's why I always say, guys, when you have a problem, declare that emergency, squawk emergency. It's important. Shout mayday, shout ban. And then I think sometimes we've forgotten about search and rescue options in terms of search and rescue normal en route, because that may be indicated when your flight is bound for an aerodrome where an ATSU is in operation and the whole or portion of your flight is conducted outside controlled airspace, and must not be indicated when your flight's bound for an aerodrome where an ATSU is not in operation. Once again, the same thing, there's nobody waiting for you on the other side. Search and rescue action will be instituted automatically in the event of a missed position report while your aircraft is flying within controlled airspace, and or in the event of non-arrival at your destination. Search and rescue action will be instituted in the event of a missed position report while your aircraft is flying in uncontrolled airspace. So maybe this is the option that we all need to look at. When requesting this type of search and rescue, please just make sure that you must be reasonably certain that it will be possible to make position reports throughout the flight and that the required reports will be made. I want to give you an example. Lots of times when a control tower asks you to report the zone outbound, if you don't report the zone outbound, we actually get the ARCC will be notified that you have not reported the zone outbound, and that is very important. It's a start of a search and rescue operation. Then the one that most people use when they fly in uncontrolled airspace or from non-ATSUs is search and rescue after a specific time. Obviously, it must be indicated when you're flying from and to aerodromes where there's no ATSU, and it will be search and rescue the air traffic service unit that you want to notify of your arrival, and the time by which you want to notify, and it's normally 1 hour, or you can use a time, or you can say search and rescue Cape Town, ETA plus 1 hour, ETA plus 2 hours, and that in fact means that you need to notify that ATSU within an hour or 2 hours of your arrival. Otherwise, they will go into the search and rescue process and notify the Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center. And this works through the world. It's not only in South Africa, obviously. There's something else. Let's think about our search and rescue options, and then we think about search and rescue null. And I want to spend 2 seconds on this. People, why would we file search and rescue null? It's the easy way out, but it's also the sad way out. Because if something happens to you in any phase of flight and you are not in controlled airspace, nobody is going to come and look for you. Nobody is going to know that you're hurt, and nobody will know to come and help you and save your life. So I always say to pilots, I know search and rescue null is the easy way out, but maybe we should just completely forget about search and rescue null and go search and rescue and one of the other options, because that's why it's there. The search and rescue service in any country is laid down as per Annex 12. So it's a state requirement, and they don't have an option. They don't have a choice. If something goes wrong with our aviators, they need to be taken care of. I just want to give you a few tips. Try and file search and rescue with the last ATC unit that you speak to on the flight. And the reason for that is that the systems in Johannesburg, or the whole systems in the current ANSP, if you are flying outside of the footprint, there won't be any strips, and it's difficult to keep control of. If you're flying from Cape Town to Petersburg, search and rescue OR or Polokwane if they are open. Make sure you activate your flight plan if you're flying in uncontrolled airspace. Otherwise, that search and rescue en route or not normal. I mean, normal is controlled airspace or to an ATSU. But, you know, if you file make sure that you activate that flight plan. Otherwise, people won't know to come and look for you. They wouldn't even know that you are airborne. So it's very important that you activate your flight plan. And please make sure that you notify the unit you have search and rescue with. If you divert, even if you are landing at a manned ATSU and it's not the ATSU that you filed search and rescue with, just tell them, guys, I've diverted, I've had search and rescue with OR, because sometimes the controllers get busy and they forget to notify the unit that you had search and rescue with. And then we start a search and rescue operation just here to find out, oh dear, you've landed safely. And that takes a lot of time and it's unnecessary. So I think that's a few tips that you can use to make it easier on everybody. Search and rescue is something that takes a lot out of any person, because you always work with the worst case scenario, and we don't want to do that. For this, it's guys, just to sharpen up a little bit, to go and read AIP Gen 3.6 and the AIC Series D 010/2019. That's got all the information for you on search and rescue options, and obviously search and rescue as such. Fly safe, stay safe, and if you need a guardian angel, phone me. I will fly with you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Santjie. Yeah, it's always great to know that you've got everyone's backs, so to speak. So if you guys ever get into some serious trouble, I hope that Santjie is the one person that whose details you've got and whose number you've got on speed dial. Is that still something you can obviously facilitate and help with, Santjie?
Yeah, obviously, the ARCC Johannesburg is running like it used to run. There's a team there working, but obviously I will facilitate. It's important that we stay on top of the game. So from a talk perspective, awareness, helping, always, I will always be there. Flight schools, I've got more time now, obviously, so it makes it a lot easier than in the old days. So people, the ARCC numbers, keep them if you're in trouble, but obviously, if I know about anything, I will make sure that the team is on it as soon as possible.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Santjie. Always a pleasure seeing you and chatting to you and hearing what your input is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. So last but not least, Caroline. And Caroline, I know, has got a very interesting story about a windsock that we've been having some fun with. You know, the strength of the windsock and the direction it's showing in, and etc. Caroline, again, like, let's just start it off properly, like we did with the rest. How, I mean, you've been in aviation for a while, and you run a very successful business in aviation. Just tell us maybe a little bit about Essential Pilot towards the end, but let's start with just saying or just asking you, how did aviation start for you? You know, where'd the bug bite?
Yeah, well, thanks, Franz. Actually, I came to aviation pretty late. I'm sort of from the generation where piloting aircraft wasn't really an option to girls. We learned to bake scones and how to sew aprons, of which neither of the two I'm very good at. So I actually came to flying much later, when I met somebody who was flying. And he invited me to come and fly with him, and I thought this was just fantastic. And I think we've had to, and I would encourage anybody who is a partner of a pilot, I strongly encourage you to actually consider flying, even if it's just the basic level, because if you fly with a partner, you never know when something might happen to your partner. And you might need to end up landing the airplane yourself. So, for all of you guys out there, I really encourage you to do it. And I mean, that's pretty much how I started. The control freak in me needed to know how to land this airplane should something go wrong. Nothing ever went wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's it all snowballed from there, and I realized, well, this is actually what I would like to do for a living. So yeah.
Fascinating. So almost a little bit by accident.
Yes, pretty much.
Excuse the pun, of course. Okay, cool. Caroline, thank you very much. Let's hear it. Look forward to your presentation.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the Cursed Crosswinds, which I think a lot of us, especially up in Joburg, have been experiencing, especially every single weekend, and then Monday morning it's perfect. So crosswinds are actually a major cause of runway excursions. A lot of that has to do with actual pilot competency in handling crosswinds. So why do we have a lot of these runway excursions? Well, quite simply, it's because general aviation pilots are having problems landing their airplanes. Because we tend to have these strong crosswinds at certain times of the year, sometimes they come up unexpectedly and we struggle to land in them. So as a causal factor, runway excursions on departure are less common. So it's less of a thing when we're taking off, because we tend to assess the weather conditions before we take off, and we're looking at the windsock, we're more aware when we are taking off. However, on landing, very few of us tend to plan for the crosswind component, and even worse, the possible gusts. So I'm going to show you a couple of considerations when you're coming into an airfield, things that you need to consider for a crosswind landing, if that's going to be the case. So first of all, the airport geography. A lot of the geographical conditions surrounding the airport can really affect the wind speed quite a lot. If your surface is very rough, so you've got a lot of buildings or generally mountainous areas, obstacles tend to reduce the speed, as does roughness. However, in the case of mountainous airports, so here, for example, I've got, this is a picture of Panorama Airport, which is nice and fairly open. So here you are likely to pick up quite strong crosswinds, because there's not that many obstacles, as you can see, surrounding this airfield here. On the other hand, if we look at George Airport, for example, as many of you would know, George Airport is surrounded by mountains. This can aggravate the crosswinds, because the crosswinds will actually get channeled through those mountains, and the wind speed can often be stronger than what is predicted or forecast because of that channeling. Then your runway surface, so especially for the guys down in the Cape, where you're getting the wind to rain and you get all that terrible wind. Also consider that a wet runway or any sort of contamination on the runway will affect your directional control as well. So it's not only, okay, well, this is my crosswind limit, that's fine, I can land on that. Also take into account the possible contamination of the runway too. Your runway width, this one is important to consider, because the narrower your runway, the less wiggle room you have. So if your crosswind landing isn't going great and you've got a very narrow runway, you're going to end up departing that runway. So you always want to try and maintain that center line. And if you can't, then it's unlikely that you're going to land safely on that runway without drifting off. So then go and consider going to land somewhere else. Just a little tip for you guys. So the stripes on the threshold, those actually indicate the width of the runway. So for example, here on this runway, we've got 4 stripes. So 4 stripes would indicate an 80-meter width runway. Here, for example, this one has got 8 stripes. So 8 stripes would indicate 30 meters. So if you can't remember the exact meterage, just remember the more stripes it's got, the wider it is. Okay, so the narrower it is, the worse it is if you have a strong crosswind. Then the wind direction and speed. So your ATIS and your METARs are very useful for planning. So now you've checked out beforehand, okay, at my destination, this is what they're predicting the forecasting or predicting the wind speeds to be. However, it is more preferable if you're going to a controlled airfield to rather get the wind from the ATC. The tower wind will be more accurate and it's closer to ground. So when the ATC actually tells you what the wind is, don't just think, oh, yeah, I don't have to repeat that. Actually take into account what they are saying to you. So that's well, especially if you're going into controlled airfields. Then we have to consider what's going to happen if you're going to unmanned airfield. Okay, so here I have to issue a warning for adult content. The moderators have asked me to do this. So yeah, so if you're going to an unmanned airfield, you now have to consider the wind direction and speed using the windsock. So obviously a flaccid windsock would indicate a lower wind speed, whereas a more erect one would be a much stronger wind. I don't know if many of you know, but the windsocks are actually designed to indicate specific speeds, dependent on their state of erectness. So it's the ICAO standard windsock is generally indicating 15 knots. Now I know it's some unmanned airfields, you might have a non-standard windsock, but it's a good idea just to ask your airport manager what wind speed, what is the maximum wind speed of our windsock. If it's an ideal windsock, it would be demarcated, alternating red, white, and obviously those indications would show you a 3-knot difference until eventually it's fully erect, in which case you have 15 knots. Now you also need to pay attention to a windsock that is not holding a steady direction or speed, because if it's sort of flapping about, that could indicate that you've got gusts as well. So it's actually more preferable in a way to have something that's maintaining its position, because you can analyze that will be more or less the wind speed. But if it keeps changing, be prepared, because you could experience gusts on the landing. Okay, now the question that a lot of people don't know, can you calculate the crosswind component? So I don't know if you guys want to think about this, but how do you actually calculate the crosswind component? So you're not actually alone, because 98% of pilots surveyed could not accurately calculate the runway crosswind from an air traffic control report. So as I said, when you've got an air traffic controller that gives you a wind, you need to be able to calculate that crosswind component. So I'm going to show you just a few quick ways of doing it. You have to find the method that is more preferable to you, but there are some good rules of thumb. So the first one is basically divide it into quarters. So if your angular difference between the runway and the wind direction is 15 degrees, so that would be the first quarter, then you would be looking at 25% of the wind velocity. 30 degrees, which is basically halfway, that would give you 50%, 45 degrees, 75%, and anything that exceeds an angular difference of 60 degrees, you need to use 100% of that crosswind component. So beyond that, you need to take that full wind speed into account. So that's probably the most practical way. If you want to get more specific, you can use the formula. So that would be your wind speed multiplied by the sine of the angular difference. Most people have got calculators on their phones. It's quite possible to do this. So in this case, if our runway is runway 21 and our wind direction is 240, speed 20 knots, you have an angular difference of 30 degrees. We take the sine of that angular difference, which is 30, which is 0.5, and that gives us a crosswind component of 10 knots. So that's quite a useful formula if you're more of a formula person. Some of you, especially students, carry the whiz wheel with you in flight. The whiz wheels nowadays actually have this very convenient little table at the bottom where you can enter from the side using your wind speed. So that would be your 20 knots. Enter from the top using your angular difference, which would be 30. And then you would read your crosswind component at the intersection of those two. So that would be 10 knots there. So different method, same result. Another, well, more modern way also is using various apps. I personally like AeroWeather. So AeroWeather has this little calculator symbol on it. Oops, sorry about that. It has this little calculator that'll open up your tools for you. You can select wind component, you punch in your wind direction, your wind speed, your runway, and it's going to spit out the crosswind for you. And it'll also tell you which direction. So here you'll know it's 10 knots and it's coming from your right. So that's going to help you quite a lot, and it's pretty easy to use as well. The gusts, as I said, that is probably the thing that causes most crosswind landings to go wrong, because these are unexpected and they're not always predictable. So in my opinion, I think the best thing to do is always apply a rule of thumb gust factor of 1.5 to your crosswind component to determine the worst case scenario. Remember, your windsock generally only represents up to 15 knots. So 1.5 is a good number. So if we take our 10 knots crosswind component, we multiply that by our gust factor of 1.5, that gives us the potential gust of 15 knots. So if you know that your aircraft has a crosswind limit of, say, 12 knots, or you only feel comfortable with a 10 knot crosswind, take into account the gust. You must be comfortable with the potential gust of 15 knots in this case. Then the next question. So do you know the crosswind limit of your aircraft? Okay, so here we're doing a little bit better in that 30% of pilots don't know or get it wrong when they asked. So check what the crosswind limit of your aircraft is. And this, once again, is not your personal limit, it's your the aircraft book limit. So the maximum demonstrated crosswind limit, that is just a factory testing scenario that will show that directional control can still be maintained at that wind speed. So it's largely affected also by certain things like the size of your rudder, the distance from the center of gravity, the availability of braking. But remember that this is not, it's not a fixed number. It can be modified by your technique, your individual currency and competency. And as I said, a lot of us don't fly crosswinds that often. So bear that in mind, and you might want to adjust that number accordingly to your current skill level. So there's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay, so remember, this is just a quick reminder just to show you the two ways of handling crosswinds. You can use a crabbed approach where you would put your ailerons into wind using opposite rudder and you crab in, and then just above the runway, you would straighten it out again. The second one, which is the more, well, it depends on the person, is your wing down or your side slip method. So here you would actually put your wing down into the wind, aileron into wind, and rudder to keep the nose straight. So you'd be coming in with the nose straight, but the wing down in this case. Whereas a crabbed approach, you would have more wings straight, but the nose tilted to an angle. Okay, so technique, whether the crosswind is light or strong, always be prepared. A little thing to remember is always point the nose with your toes and use your ailerons to stay over the center line. Then also something which I'm passionate about is stable approaches. Remember that when we did the webinar on stable approaches, one of the key things for a stable approach, which you would have at 500 foot above your airport level, is maintaining your runway track, which is far more challenging when you've got a crosswind. So to maintain the track, remember you want to be within 20 degrees of the runway heading and within 10 degrees of the runway center line. You need to use your control inputs to manage that drift. If you go out of these parameters, even though you've gone past the stable approach point, you need to execute a go around. Don't try and force it down or land the aircraft skew. You can cause a lot of damage to the aircraft and incur a runway excursion. So keep those numbers in mind. If I'm going wrong, I'm doing a go around. Configuration, so also the amount of flap that you use. So you'll find in most POHs or pilot operating handbooks for your aircraft, you'll normally find that they actually reduce the amount of flap for a crosswind approach. So this reduces the surface area on which the crosswind can actually act after landing. It also improves your directional control. So really check up on the POH of the aircraft that you're flying, particularly people that are flying lots of different aircraft. Check what the crosswind, what the flap setting needs to be for that particular aircraft. Okay, and then finally, some questions to ask yourself. How much training have you had in crosswinds? How long have you been flying and where? If you're flying, I don't know, in the Cape, my hat off to you. I think you guys are my heroes because those winds, I mean, here in Joburg, we get scared of 10-knot crosswinds. How long have you been flying that particular aircraft as well? Because you need to know the characteristics and how that aircraft handles in the crosswinds as well. Have you flown in gusty conditions before? So where the wind speed is not constant and the direction is changing, have you flown in those sort of conditions before? And when was the last time you flew in wind? Okay, and that's it. So this simple device ensures that you will always be landing into the wind. So that's me, and if you've got any questions or you want to email me, contact me, by all means, I will try and help you out.
Excellent. Thank you, Caroline. I think you did a stellar job. I was expecting more giggles from you, but I think well done. You handled it expertly and professionally. Yeah, it's very interesting, you know, something as small as windsock, and that you know, just knowing what it means, you know, depending on how the windsock is standing.
Yeah, but I always say, you know, check what your airfield, check with your airport manager. Do you have a standard windsock? What is the maximum wind speed? Yeah,
that's right, because you also get different windsocks that
correct,
that present differently.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Well, guys, Caroline, thank you very much. That was awesome. Any questions you guys want to pop in quickly before we wrap this up? Go for it so we can deal with it. But that was all the presentations for this evening. Thank you very much to all the panelists and for Neil and Unli behind the scenes, doing all the work of getting all of us together, and obviously just also a big thank you to Cobus Toerien. Cobus works very hard to get this all together and get us all focused up on the night and all the presentations, etc., etc. But more importantly, I think thank you for joining us. There's a lot of familiar faces, and we see a bunch of new guys, which is awesome. I mean, that's why we do it. And again, just as a last request for everyone who joins us and enjoys these webinars, the next one, your entry fee is to invite a friend with, so we can grow this. And as you guys can see, this is very informal. It's really just a discussion, a chat about aviation, about safety. Hopefully one or two things stick in your mind that helps you out next time to be a little bit safer. We learn some things along the way as well. Again, thanks to all the panelists. Thanks for you guys joining us. Neil, I don't know if you want to quickly jump on and say something, but that's it from me. Thanks, guys.
Franz, thank you so much. And again, thank you to all our speakers for the time that they've put into this. It's a love that they've got. They've got a passion for this, and it shone really bright tonight. And it's really about keeping everybody safe. And to everybody that joined tonight, thank you so much. And as Franz mentioned, the next time, bring your friends with, let them know. It's a good conversation. It's not too hardcore. And tonight, what was really interesting was to see all the chats coming through, lots of questions coming through. So that engagement was fantastic. And I think we'll try and continue with that going forward. It just makes it a lot more fun. So if you wanted to see the presentations again, we will share the presentation with everybody that is registered. And if you want to catch the previous webinars that we've run before, just head to virtualaerosouthafrica.co.za. That's virtualaerosouthafrica.za. And you can view all the past webinars there. There's some really good stuff there. And just to end off, thanks to everybody once again, and have a fantastic evening. Take care, everybody. Ciao.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.